The Marines in the hospital bed didn't know their nurse was a legend. Captain Sarah Chen changed their bandages, checked their vitals, and spoke to them in a calm, reassuring voice that made pain bearable. They saw her as gentle, caring, maybe a little too emotional for combat zones. What they didn't see was the tattoo hidden beneath her sleeve, a small crosshair, with the number 89 beneath it. What they didn't know was that Captain Chen held the fourth highest confirmed kill count of any female sniper in U.S. military history. What they couldn't imagine was that in 6 hours, when the hospital came under siege, their gentle nurse would pick up a rifle and remind everyone why she'd earned that number. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Acts of Veterans so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Captain Sarah Chen was 32 years old when she arrived at Forward Operating Base Sentinel in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. She came as a combat nurse, assigned to the field hospital that treated casualties from across the region. She was soft-spoken, professional, the kind of medical officer who remembered every patient's name, their hometown, what they missed most about home. When they were scared, she stayed with them until they weren't. The younger medics admired her compassion. The doctors respected her clinical skills. The wounded Marines trusted her completely. None of them knew who she'd been before. 5 years earlier, Captain Sarah Chen had been Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, Marine Scout Sniper, operating out of Fallujah, Iraq. For 3 deployments spanning for years, she'd been one of the most effective snipers in theater. Her record spoke for itself. 89 confirmed kills. Longest shot, 1,247 meters. 0 collateral casualties. 3 Bronze Stars. 1 Silver Star for actions that remain classified. She'd been offered promotion, instructor positions, a path to becoming one of the most decorated snipers in Marine Corps history. Instead, she'd walked away. The decision hadn't been about fear or inability. It had been about weight. Every time she looked through a scope, she saw faces. Every time she pulled a trigger, she added another ghost to the collection that visited her at night. By her 3rd deployment, she couldn't sleep without seeing them. All 89, not as threats, as people, with families, lives, futures she'd ended with a single squeeze of her finger. When her enlistment ended, she made a choice. Stay in the military she loved serving, but find a different way to contribute. A way that saved lives instead of taking them. She'd gone to nursing school, retrained, built a new identity around healing. At FOB Sentinel, nobody knew about her past. Her service record listed her Moss as medical, with previous service redacted under privacy protocols. The tattoo on her inner forearm, a small crosshair with 89 beneath it, stayed hidden under her sleeves. She wanted it that way. The Sarah Chen, who'd been a sniper, was someone she left behind. The woman she'd become was someone who stopped bleeding, not caused it. The attack came on November 3rd at 2,147 hours. Sarah was finishing her shift in the field hospital when the first mortar round hit. The explosion shook the building, rattling medical equipment, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Alarms shrieked. The hospital's emergency protocol activated immediately. Sarah moved on instinct, years of training kicking in. She grabbed the nearest wounded soldier, a corporal with a leg injury, and helped him into a reinforced section of the building. "What's happening?" he asked, voice tight with pain and fear. "We're under attack," Sarah said, calmly. "Stay here. You're safe." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. The field hospital sat on the eastern edge of FOB Sentinel, separated from the main defensive positions by 200 meters of open ground. It was protected by a small security detail, 8 Marines, but it had never been designed to withstand a direct assault. The enemy had clearly identified it as a target. More mortars fell, closer now. Then came the distinctive sound of small arms fire. AK-47s, PKM machine guns, RPGs. Dr. James Mitchell, the senior medical officer, appeared in the doorway. "Chen, we need to evacuate the critical patients to the main bunker." Sarah assessed quickly. They had 14 patients in the hospital, 7 ambulatory, 7 bedbound, including 3 on ventilators. "Sir, we can't move the ventilator patients in time. The attack's too close." Mitchell's face paled. He knew she was right. Outside, the gunfire intensified. Someone screamed. Then the unmistakable sound of the perimeter being breached. Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, head of the hospital security detail, burst into the room. Blood streamed from a head wound. "Doc, We've got enemy fighters inside the perimeter. Maybe 20. They're pushing toward the hospital. We can't hold them. Mitchell looked at Sarah, then at Torres. How long until reinforcements? QRF is engaged on the north side. 10 minutes at best. 10 minutes. Sarah knew what that meant. The fighters would reach the hospital in 2. She looked at the 7 patients who couldn't be moved. Young Marines, some barely 20 years old. They'd survived firefights, IEDs, desperate situations. And now they were about to die in a hospital bed because they couldn't run. Something cold settled in Sarah's chest. A familiar feeling she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. She turned to Torres. Sergeant, where's your rifle? Torres blinked, confused. My M4? It's give it to me, and your spare magazines. Captain, I don't think. Now, Sergeant. Something in her voice, the absolute command. The shift from gentle nurse to something harder made Torres obey without further question. Sarah took the rifle, checked the chamber, loaded magazine, tactical sling. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Dr. Mitchell stared at her. Chen, what are you doing? Sarah didn't answer. She was already moving toward the window, scanning the approach routes to the hospital. The enemy fighters were advancing into groups. One from the east, one from the southeast, both using the terrain intelligently, staying low, moving during the explosions to mask their sound. Sarah's mind shifted into a mode she hadn't accessed in 5 years. Range estimation, wind calculation, target prioritization, engagement sequence. The first group had a leader. She could tell by the way he moved how the others checked with him before advancing. Tall, carrying an RPG. He'd use it on the hospital once he got within range. Sarah steadied her breathing, found her position. The M4 wasn't her preferred weapon. She'd trained on the M4 sniper rifle, but it would do. She waited, patient, letting them come closer. Watching their pattern, the RPG gunner stopped behind a low wall, 40 meters, preparing to fire. Sarah exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the night. The RPG gunner dropped. The other fighters scattered, confused, trying to identify where the shot had come from. Sarah was already tracking the second priority target, a fighter carrying a PKM machine gun. If he got set up, he'd suppress the entire hospital defense. She fired. He fell. Behind her, Torres whispered, "Holy shit." Sarah ignored him. She was fully in the zone now. The place she lived in for 4 years, where time slowed, where every movement registered, where her body and weapon were one system with a single purpose. She worked through the eastern group methodically, each shot deliberate, each shot counting. When they tried to advance, she dropped the lead man. When they tried to flank, she cut off the route. When they returned fire blindly, she used the muzzle flashes to locate them. Within 3 minutes, the eastern assault collapsed. Survivors retreating, dragging wounded, abandoning the attack. Sarah shifted to the southeast group. They'd seen what happened and were more cautious, using better cover, moving in shorter bounds. But Sarah had done this in Fallujah, against trained insurgents who'd survived years of urban combat. These fighters were good. She was better. She identified their pattern, watched 3 movements, predicted the 4th. When a fighter emerged where she expected, her shot was already in the air. One of the fighters shouted something in Pashto. She understood enough to know what he'd said. Sniper. We have a sniper. They tried to suppress her position. Bullets hammered the window frame. Sarah dropped below, moved to a different window, and resumed firing from an unexpected angle. The southeast group began to break. She could see it in their movements. The hesitation. The way they looked back toward their fallback positions instead of forward toward their objective. She fired 3 more shots, stopped precise, calculated, and the group scattered entirely, melting back into the darkness. Silence fell, heavy, ringing. Sarah lowered the rifle. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, but inside, she felt something crack open. All the feelings she buried for 5 years, all the ghosts she tried to leave behind. Dr. Mitchell approached slowly, staring at her like he'd never seen her before. Chen, what? How did you? Sarah set the rifle down carefully. I used to do this for a living, sir. Torres found his voice. Captain, you just held off to assault groups by yourself. Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that? Sarah didn't answer. She was looking at her hands. The same hands that had just taken lives. The same hands that had spent 5 years saving them. She felt sick, exhausted, and desperately sad. But the patients were alive. All 14 of them, because she'd become what she'd sworn never to be again. The QRF arrived 7 minutes later. By then, the attack had been repelled. The enemy withdrew completely, leaving behind casualties and equipment. When the base commander, Colonel Patricia Hayes, arrived at the hospital to assess the situation, Torres met her at the door. "Sir, you need to hear what happened." Hayes listened to Torres' account, looked at the defensive position Sarah had held, walked the perimeter, and saw the evidence of precise, disciplined shooting. She found Sarah in the hospital's break room, sitting alone, staring at her hands. "Captain Chen," Hayes said quietly. Sarah stood at attention, at ease. "Sit." Hayes pulled up a chair across from her. "I just reviewed your complete service record. The classified sections. I had to pull strings to access it." Sarah said nothing. Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, Marine Scout Sniper, 89 confirmed kills, 3 deployments, one of the most effective snipers of the Iraq War. Hayes paused. "Why didn't anyone here know?" Sarah's voice was quiet. "Because I didn't want to be that person anymore, ma'am. I wanted to save lives, not take them. But tonight you took lives." "Yes, ma'am. To save lives." Sarah looked up, meeting Hayes' eyes. "Yes, ma'am." Hayes leaned back. "Captain, you held this hospital against a determined assault. You protected 14 wounded Marines who couldn't protect themselves. You did what was necessary." "I know, ma'am, but that doesn't make it easier." Hayes nodded slowly. "No, it doesn't. The weight doesn't get lighter just because the cause was just." She stood. "You saved lives tonight, Captain, both as a sniper and as a nurse. That's who you are. Both things, not one or the other." Over the following days, word spread through Fob Sentinel. The general nurse who'd held the hospital, the medical officer who turned out to be a legendary sniper, the woman who walked away from 89 kills only to add more when it mattered most. Marines approached her differently now. Some with awe, some with questions, some with the recognition of seeing a fellow warrior who carried weight. Sarah treated it all the same way she treated everything else. Quietly, with dignity, without seeking attention. But something had changed inside her. She'd spent 5 years running from who she'd been, trying to bury the sniper under the nurse, believing she had to choose one identity or the other. That night had taught her differently. She was both, the healer and the protector, the gentle hands and the steady trigger finger, the woman who cried when patients died and the warrior who ensured they didn't die unnecessarily. One afternoon, a young private with a shoulder wound asked her about it. "Captain, is it true? You really were a sniper?" Sarah changed his bandage with the same gentle care she always had. "Yes. Do you regret it? What you did back then?" Sarah thought about the question carefully. "I regret the necessity of it. I regret that the world requires people like I was. But I don't regret protecting the Marines who needed protecting." She finished securing the bandage. "Just like I don't regret protecting you." The private nodded, understanding something he couldn't quite articulate. Later that week, Sarah stood in her quarters and looked at the tattoo on her forearm. The crosshair, the number 89. She'd added several more that night. The exact number didn't matter. What mattered was why. She'd spent 5 years believing that healing and hurting were opposites, that she had to choose between being a warrior and being a caregiver. But they weren't opposites. They were two sides of the same commitment, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, whether that meant stitching wounds or preventing them, whether that meant administering morphine or ensuring patients never needed it. Sarah Chen was a nurse. Sarah Chen was a sniper, and on the night FOB Sentinel's hospital came under attack, she'd been exactly who she needed to be, both. Moral, we contain multitudes. The person who heals can also protect. The warrior can also care. True strength isn't choosing between your identities, it's knowing when each one is needed and having the courage to be both. If this story moved you, don't forget to show your support. Subscribe to Acts of Veterans for more true tales of courage, sacrifice, and honor. Stories that remind us of the quiet strength carried by those who serve. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories reach. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never forget the heroes among us.